"Sir, you don't know me, but you're gonna die today if you go inside that building." The man in the expensive navy blue suit stopped mid-step. He turned slowly, eyes narrowing behind designer sunglasses. She looked like she hadn't bathed in weeks. A dirty hoodie, ripped jeans, mud-stained face. Just a teenage homeless girl with shaky hands and a wild look in her eyes. But her voice, it didn't shake. Not once. "Hey, this is Richard King, 45 years old, one of the most powerful billionaires in tech. Made his fortune turning simple software into global gold. CEO of Kindtech Industries, a company worth billions. But today, none of that money could protect him from what was coming. And that girl, the one no one would look twice at. Her name was Ellie, 17, homeless, living on scraps and luck. And the secret she carried, it could save Richard King's life, or destroy it all. Sir, you don't know me, but if you walk into that building, you're gonna die today." Richard King froze. The voice came from his right, low, shaky, but serious. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a warning. And it came from someone most people wouldn't even look at twice. She was sitting on the sidewalk, back against the stone wall of his company's headquarters, a dirty hoodie covering her head, face smudged with street grime, and a ragged sketchbook clutched in her arms like it was all she had left in the world. She looked 17, maybe younger. A young black girl, skinny, tired, and clearly homeless. He blinked at her. "What did you say?" he asked, stepping closer. "I said, don't go in there. I heard some men this morning. They are planning to shoot you. You'll be dead before lunch." His two bodyguards, men in dark suits and earpieces, moved in fast, one of them reaching for his gun, the other stepping between Richard and the girl. "Back off," the guard said. "Sir, don't engage." Richard raised his hand. "Wait." He looked at the girl again. "What's your name?" "Ellie." "You're saying someone's going to kill me today?" She nodded once. "Yes. I heard two men talking in the alley behind the coffee shop on 9th. Said something about taking the shot when he gets out the car. They had guns. Real ones. I don't know who they were, but they were watching this place." Richard's brows furrowed. It sounded crazy. But something in her eyes, something about the way she said it, felt different. He didn't know why, but he believed her. At least enough to not brush it off. His guard leaned in. "We're sweeping the building and checking the car again now." Richard took a step back from the sidewalk, looking up at the tall glass skyscraper with his company's logo at the top. Kindtech Industries. He came here every morning, same routine, same schedule. Today was supposed to be no different. But something was off. His phone buzzed in his hand. He looked down to check it, and in that second, a sharp crack rang out across the street. Gunshot. The bullet hit the side mirror of his car, inches from where his head had just been. "Get down," his bodyguard yelled, grabbing Richard and pulling him behind the vehicle. People screamed. Chaos broke out on the street. Ellie didn't flinch. She just sat there, wide-eyed, like she knew it would happen. Minutes later, police had blocked off the road. Security teams were checking rooftops. But the shooter was gone. No trace. Richard sat in the back of his SUV, still processing what just happened. His bodyguards stood close, talking into radios. But his eyes were fixed on the sidewalk, on Ellie. She was still sitting there, holding her sketchbook tight, staring at nothing. He motioned to one of the guards. "Bring her here." The man hesitated, then nodded and walked over. A moment later, Ellie climbed into the SUV across from Richard. Her clothes smelled like trash and rain. She looked uncomfortable but didn't complain. "You just saved my life," Richard said. "Why?" She shrugged. "Didn't want to watch a man get murdered in front of me." He tilted his head. "You could have walked away. Stayed silent." She stared at her knees. "I know what it feels like when nobody listens to you. When you don't matter. I didn't want that for you." There was a long pause. Then Richard asked quietly, "Do you have somewhere to stay?" "No. Anyone looking after you?" "Nope." He looked at her sketchbook. "What's that?" She flipped it open slowly, revealing pages of hand-drawn buildings, inventions, designs. They weren't perfect, but they were creative. Detailed. Impressive. "You draw these?" "Yeah." He nodded slowly. "You're coming with me." Her head snapped up. "What?" "Just for now. You're not safe out here. And apparently, neither am I." Later that night, Richard's estate was nothing like Ellie had ever seen. A glass mansion overlooking the city, staff in every corner, food that looked too fancy to touch. She sat at the edge of a long white couch, hands in her lap, while one of the maids brought her a plate of warm food. She hadn't eaten like that in months. Richard came into the room with a man beside him, gray suit, silver hair, kind smile. "This is Mr. Grant," Richard said. "My advisor. He's been with me for years." Ellie nodded but didn't speak. Mr. Grant smiled. "So, you're the young hero of the day." "I guess." Grant studied her, eyes soft but sharp. "You know, it's dangerous to get involved in things you don't understand." "I understand bullets," Ellie said. One almost took his head off. Grant raised an eyebrow. "Fair point." After he left the room, Richard sat down across from her. "I want to know what you heard, every detail. Don't leave anything out." So she told him. About the alley, the coffee shop, the two men whispering with guns in their hands. About how she followed them for a few blocks before they disappeared into a black van. She didn't get plates, didn't see faces, but she remembered their voices. One said, "The moment he steps out, it's done." Richard leaned back, thinking. Ellie looked up at him. "Do you have enemies?" "I run a billion-dollar company. I have thousands. But someone really wants you dead." "Yes," he said quietly. "And I think I know why." Flashback, 2 years ago. Richard had been in the middle of a hostile takeover. Kindtech was bleeding money, and he made a tough call, cut out his co-founder to save the company. That man, his once best friend, vanished after the boardroom betrayal. Rumors said he went overseas. Others said he was quietly bought off. But Richard always knew. That kind of betrayal leaves a scar. Back to present. Richard stood up and walked to the window. "I owe you my life, Ellie." She looked away. "I'm not used to people saying that. You'll be safe here." "But you're not," she said. "That man in the gray suit, Mr. Grant. He doesn't like me." Richard turned, surprised. "Why do you say that? People who don't like you always try to act extra nice." He smiled too much. Richard chuckled. "He's just cautious. He's known me forever." Ellie didn't respond. But deep down, she didn't trust Grant. Next morning, the security team reported back. No trace of the van. No fingerprints. No camera footage. Whoever planned this was smart. Careful. Ruthless. Ellie walked the halls like a ghost. No one talked to her. They just stared. But that afternoon, she found something strange. A locked cabinet in Richard's private office had been forced open. Just a small dent on the side. Almost invisible. She told Richard. He called in his IT team and discovered a flash drive was missing. No one could explain it. Except Ellie. "Who knew the code to that cabinet?" she asked. "Just me and Grant." Richard King stood in front of the open cabinet, his fingers tracing the thin dent near the lock. The small flash drive that used to sit inside was gone. Only 2 people knew the code. Himself and Grant. His most trusted advisor. "I don't understand," Richard muttered. Ellie stood a few feet away, arms crossed. "Maybe you don't want to." He turned to face her. "You think he stole it?" "I think someone did," she replied. "And unless you've got a ghost in this mansion, it's someone close." A silence settled between them. Richard didn't want to believe it. Grant had been with him since the early days. Through the company's rise, its fall, and its rebirth. He helped rebuild Kindtech after the betrayal. He was there when Richard's wife died. There when the world turned its back on him. And now, this? He shook his head. "We'll get the footage. There are cameras in the hallway." Ellie frowned. "Then let's see it." An hour later, in the estate's private surveillance room, 2 guards pulled up the footage from the night before. They fast-forwarded through hours of nothing. Then, around 2:46 a.m., a shadowy figure appeared in the hallway. The man wore a dark hoodie, head low, hands gloved. He paused in front of the office door, pulled something from his pocket, and quietly slipped inside. The camera never caught his face. But there was one thing, a small flash of light on his wrist. A silver watch. Richard leaned closer. "Pause it. Zoom in." The guard did. The silver glint was subtle, but Richard recognized the shape instantly. A custom Omega timepiece, the exact kind he had gifted to Grant 3 months ago for his 60th birthday. His chest tightened. "Get Grant," Richard said coldly. "Now." Meanwhile, Grant was already in the building, seated in the lounge reading a newspaper, a cup of tea beside him. He smiled when the guard approached. "Mr. King would like to see you," the guard said. Grant stood, smoothing his suit. "Of course. Is something wrong?" "We'll let him explain." Back in the office, Grant stepped in calmly, unaware of the tension hanging in the air. Ellie sat to the side, silent. The security footage still played on the screen behind Richard's desk. "Close the door," Richard said. Grant obeyed, adjusting his tie. "You've been with me for over 20 years, Grant," Richard began. "You've stood by me in every storm." Grant nodded. "And I always will." "Then tell me why someone wearing your exact watch broke into my office last night and stole confidential data." Grant blinked. He turned toward the screen. The footage paused on the silver flash. I don't know," he said, voice low. "That could be anyone. Anyone who knows the code to the cabinet. Come on, Grant. I've never betrayed you, Richard. Never." His voice cracked slightly. "You're like a son to me." "Then prove it. Let's search your room. Your car. Your devices." Grant hesitated. "Just a second." But it was enough. "You're hesitating," Ellie said. "I'm shocked." Grant snapped. "Accused in front of a child and a camera glitch." "Then you won't mind us checking," Richard said. "Right." Grant's jaw tightened. Then he nodded slowly. "Fine." 20 minutes later. Security found nothing in his car or his phone. But in the drawer of his guest bedroom, buried beneath old files, they found the flash drive. Richard stared at it in silence. "Why?" he whispered. Grant stood still, pale. I was going to give it back. I swear. I just wanted to see what was on it." "Why now? Why break in?" Richard's voice rose. "That cabinet holds Kintech's AI prototype blueprints. That's not curiosity. That's theft." Grant didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Ellie. "You," he said bitterly. "You did this. Ever since she showed up." "Stop," Richard snapped. "You were the one person I thought I could trust with my life." Grant's face fell. "You have no idea," he said quietly. "What's coming?" Richard frowned. "What do you mean?" But Grant said nothing more. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. The betrayal sat heavy in his chest. He'd handed everything to Grant over the years: access, power, even partial ownership. And now, he couldn't tell if Grant was the enemy or just a pawn. Ellie sat outside by the fountain, sketchbook in hand, quietly drawing. Richard joined her. "I don't know if he's the real threat," he said. But he knew something. He said, "You have no idea what's coming," Ellie repeated. "That means someone else is behind this." Richard nodded. "I think so too." She looked up. "So, what now?" He took a deep breath. "We find out who it is. And this time, we don't trust anyone." Flashback, 6 weeks ago. In a dimly lit warehouse in D.C., a man in a crisp gray suit adjusted his cufflinks. "Is the plan ready?" he asked. A second man nodded. "Yes, sir. The girl's location is known. And the hit will happen the moment Richard King steps out of the car." The man smiled. "Good. Once he's out of the picture, Kintech is mine." Back to present. Ellie drew a picture of a tall figure with a briefcase walking into a skyscraper, while shadows followed him from all sides. Richard watched her silently. "You're smart, kid," he said. "Too smart to be on the street." She shrugged. "Street taught me to listen. That's all." "Well, listen closely now," he said. "We're going to find the person behind this. But we need to move quietly." Ellie nodded. Richard stood, heading back inside. But as he disappeared, she looked down at her drawing. And in the corner, barely noticeable, she'd drawn a man with silver hair, watching from the shadows. It was 3:17 a.m. when Richard sat up in bed, heart racing, sweat clinging to his back. He had the dream again. Gunshots. Blood on his white shirt. The scream of a girl. Ellie's voice calling his name. He reached for the glass of water on the nightstand and took a deep breath. The pressure had been building. Someone wanted him gone, and after Grant's betrayal, Richard knew one thing for sure. The real enemy was still out there. Close. Watching. Earlier that morning, Ellie sat across from Richard at breakfast, stirring her hot cocoa. She didn't say much. She never did in the mornings. But her eyes stayed fixed on the headlines in the open newspaper. Kintech stocks plunge after security breach. "Someone's getting what they want," she said quietly. Richard nodded. "Yeah, and now they are using public fear to weaken us. Do you think the hitman's still coming?" He paused. "Honestly, yeah. They've already come this far. It'd make sense to finish the job." Ellie leaned in. "Then we stop waiting and go hunting." He looked at her and smiled. "You really are something else." They started making a list. Ellie called it the Sue's list. Anyone that has power, access, and a reason to want you gone, she explained. Let's write them all. They wrote. 1. Grant, already exposed, maybe not the mastermind, but suspicious. 2. Board members of Kindtech, especially those who voted against Richard's AI expansion project. 3. Investors who lost big last year, some had millions wiped overnight. 4. Former CEO, Davis Lang, fired 5 years ago for shady deals. Silent ever since. Let's start with Davis, Ellie said. He's been too quiet for someone who once ran the whole show. Richard picked up the phone. I'll have my guy dig into him. But Ellie stopped him. No. If someone on the inside is leaking info, we can't use your guys. We find him ourselves. Richard raised an eyebrow. You got a phone, right? She asked. He handed it over. She cracked a smile. Then welcome to Street Research 101. A few hours later, Ellie and Richard sat at a corner table. She tapped through several sites, forums, and business blogs using a public Wi-Fi connection. No traceable IP. No trails. Hey, she said. Davis Lang's been consulting for a rival tech firm called Nexacore. Guess who runs Nexacore? Who? Paul Renner. Your old college buddy. The one you outbid for the government AI contract last year. Richard frowned. Paul's always been jealous. But I didn't think he'd stoop to this. Ellie leaned in. Jealous men with money and no conscience. Dangerous combo. They scanned deeper. Articles. Leaks. One line stood out. Nexacore to announce new AI program, similar to Kindtech's unreleased prototype, in 30 days. Richard froze. That's my design, he muttered. That's my tech. They're about to launch it before me. Ellie's voice dropped to a whisper. And if you die before then, they'll own the market, and I'll be too dead to stop it. Later that night, Richard held a private meeting in his penthouse office. Only 2 other people were invited, Ellie and Maria, his most loyal security chief. We stage a leak, Richard explained. We plant false intel that I'm meeting with the FBI tomorrow about Nexacore stealing my prototype. Maria's eyes lit up. That'll shake the trees. If someone's working for Nexacore, they'll panic. Ellie added, they'll either try to stop you, or make their move sooner. Richard nodded. Exactly. We'll catch them when they strike. The next day, at 10 a.m., Richard left his building surrounded by bodyguards. Maria led the security convoy. Ellie stayed back, watching from a nearby van with 2 hidden cameras rolling. But something felt off. A black van appeared 2 blocks ahead, parked at an odd angle. The windows tinted dark. Maria's voice came over the walkie. We've got a situation. Suspicious vehicle at 12 o'clock. Just as the words left her mouth, the black van's back door slid open. A man in a hoodie raised a rifle. But he didn't aim at Richard. He aimed at Maria. Before anyone could react, bang. The sniper fired. Maria dropped. Chaos erupted. Bodyguards pulled Richard into the car. Ellie screamed through the radio. Fall back. Get him out. But Richard wasn't listening. He stepped out, rushing to Maria's side. She was bleeding, but alive. Then he saw it. The shooter wasn't running away. He was walking toward them, with a badge. FBI. Don't move. Everyone froze. Your chief of security just triggered a silent signal to a hidden transmitter in Nexacore's database, the agent shouted. We've been tracking the mole for weeks. She's been feeding them all your info. Richard stared, stunned. Maria, he whispered. She coughed, smirked, and whispered something just for him. You trusted the wrong people. Later that day, Maria was arrested at the hospital. Ellie and Richard sat in silence in the estate's library. She was there since the beginning, he said. My father hired her before he passed. She knew everything, Ellie said. She always had access to your meetings, your files, even the panic codes. And Grant was just her cover, Richard muttered. She planted that watch on him, made him look guilty. Ellie nodded. And while we focused on Grant, she stayed in the shadows. Richard ran a hand through his hair. I'm done playing defense. Kindtech launched their AI prototype ahead of schedule, thanks to Ellie's help and a small group of trusted engineers. The media exploded with praise. And the story broke. Nexacore's stolen tech, secret recordings, and planned assassination of Richard King, all exposed with the help of federal agents. Davis Lang and Paul Renner were both arrested on conspiracy and attempted murder charges. But Richard didn't care about the headlines. He sat on the same bench outside the skyscraper, the spot where he first met Ellie. She walked up quietly, this time in a clean hoodie and jeans, her sketchbook under her arm. Guess you don't need me anymore, she said. He chuckled. Actually, I want to offer you a job. She blinked. What? Head of strategy. I trust you more than anyone. And your street instincts. Better than any boardroom suit. She smirked. I'll think about it. They sat in silence a moment. Then Ellie asked, You ever think about what would have happened if I didn't warn you that first day? He looked out at the busy street. Yeah, he said. I'd be dead. And Kindtech would belong to snakes. She nodded. Crazy what a homeless girl and a billionaire can do together, heh? He smiled. The world doesn't know it yet, but you just saved the future.